Three, two, one. So as people are probably consciously aware of as they entered this video, technical issues this week. The webcam that we bought for each of us, your one has broken.
Yeah, I know. It was like the top quality that money could buy straight from China. So I'm pretty disappointed that in
Yeah.
like 3 months they've died. So you'll have to apologise for my grainy, saturated face. It's a blessing
Yeah.
in disguise.
Yeah, I can't believe that the off-brand product that we bought from China has like failed us. You know, we seen the reviews; they were fantastic, and it still managed to fail.
Oh, shock. That's what 14,000 positive reviews gets you. The low shite.
Yeah, I guess so. So if you didn't know, this is Guide to the 21st Century, a topical podcast between two friends, Lewis and I, where we bring two topics to the table each week, disseminate our views, and try and navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
Yep, that's exactly right. So 5 weeks up until now, Scott and I, we've thought about a little bit of information, something that's been kicking around in our mind, and we've brought it to the podcast, and the idea is that we've been having a discussion about that and hopefully arriving at these new conclusions.
Yeah, so I have a bit of a good news, I guess, is probably what I would say. If you remember in week 3, I think it was, my topic was the corporate pandering that seems to be going on now in the Black Lives Matter movement. So I spoke about a racist incident that happened in the Europa League, which is a football league in Europe. The team that I support, Rangers, were playing in, and one of the players was racially abused. And I basically spoke about how if the corporation doesn't do anything, you know, it's all for show, all the advertising, sort of the Black Lives Matter messaging. But today, the investigation was concluded today, and the player got a 10-match ban for the incident. So obviously they came to the same conclusion that we did, that there was enough evidence to safely say that there was a racist incident that occurred. And it turns out that 10 matches is the minimum ban that a player can receive for racial abuse. So they thought that the evidence was enough to do that, and a 10-match ban was given. Thoughts on the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that something was actioned in the end, because that was where we were quite hung up on the fact that I was convinced that they weren't going to do anything because I was worried that there wasn't going to be enough evidence. But I agree with that decision, that there was clearly enough to prosecute this person for. 10 matches being banned. I don't know how long that is in football, but is that like several years?
No, that'll probably be one season. You can have a team typically would play 10 games if they were to get through to the group stages. So the chances are they'll play more games than that next season. But
well, I don't know. I guess I can say I'm relatively happy to hear that something's happened.
Yeah, happy to hear something's happened. Not too sure if the severity of the ban was enough, but at least something happened, I guess. It actually came out a couple of days ago. I googled it a couple of days ago to see what was happening with this whole situation, and I read that the player had been temporarily suspended for one game while the investigation was pending. But UEFA actually announced that suspension 2 hours after the club announced he wouldn't be playing anyway because he was ill.
Oh, sure, okay.
So it was a very strange suspension. But anyways, it came out 10-match ban. So it's happened. Not sure of the severity, but glad that at least something was happening.
Yeah, that's good. And actually, I quite like the idea of us maybe approaching previous issues. You know, as we said previously, we would love it if people continue the conversation in the comments. But also quite like the idea of maybe looking at these topical subjects that we discuss when the news is pretty fresh, and then as we said, just hopefully coming back to the conclusion. So hopefully I have more of that in the future for you.
Yeah, so if we miss anything out during these episodes, if we say anything that's just straight up batshit crazy, please feel free to leave a comment, as long as you're not a bot, because for God's sake, I'm fed up deleting those comments.
Yeah, well, I'd enough of you, please.
Yeah. So anyway, you're first this week, Lewis. What's been kicking around in the old noggin?
So, usually I give you a bit of a preface about why I've came to the decision on the topic I'm talking about this week, but to be honest with you, I don't think there's any particular pressing thought that's occurred to me, but what I do want to talk about is basically, I want to talk about the decisions and kind of the ramifications of the decisions and the choices that you make as you leave secondary school. So wherever that is, depending on what country you are in Scotland, that's leaving your high school. So basically a decision where you start thinking about, you know, these big decisions, like, am I going to go to college? I'm going to go to university. Am I going to just get a job? Or am I going to go into a trade? Like, what's going to happen here? Because I think it's a very important decision. It's one of those ones that you look back and you kind of scoff because it's like, of course it's going to be a big decision. But when you think about where I would have been if I'd done something different right now, I think that's probably what got me thinking about this topic. So yeah, that's exactly it. I want to have a talk about what happens when you leave secondary school, and ideally, I would like to talk about maybe the decisions or the thoughts that hadn't occurred to us at the time that we now know, given what we've been through.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting topic because you give this decision to like a when you start thinking about these things when you're like, for us it was like when we were like 16.
Mm-hmm.
When you're choosing your sort of advanced subjects in school, and your teachers are like, what are you going to do after this? Like, start choosing things that you want to go on to do after. So you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
thrusting the responsibility probably to someone who can't really do it, but they're about to become like an adult, so they're having to kind of learn as they go, like make it up on the fly, try and figure out who they are and what they're doing.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like the decision process starts very, very early, and the ramifications of what you end up doing can be really years down the line. Like, for instance, like you and I, we're like 25 now, and we're now like pretty settled as a result of these decisions that we made 10, 15 years ago. So
Yeah.
what I thought actually it might be a good idea is, because obviously this topic for each and every person is going to be extremely unique. Like this is, there are some people that will be in different scenarios, different backgrounds, they'll have different interests, so we cannot possibly advise people what they should be doing. So what I thought it would just be good was to give a bit of background on where we were coming from, maybe the path that we've went through, and as I said, we'll maybe like to highlight the decisions that we made or didn't make, because we obviously can't tell people what's right or wrong. You and I will be kind of inherently biased in this conversation because we both end up going into a kind of a technical degree, so we won't have as much as maybe some of the background that you would be able to ask someone that went down a different path. But it's I think this could be a good kind of reflective one for us. So what I'll do is I'll just like really briefly summarize, what the process I went through. So because like you said, you start making these decisions when you're like 16, 17 years old, and you start thinking about what are the subjects I want to study in school that'll let me get to whatever I want to get to. And I don't know. Maybe I think I was a bit of an odd decision, which is why I want to talk about this as well. I was in an odd position because throughout my entire life there was just no question about where I would be doing or what. When I was younger, there was maybe ideas of working with my dad, but my dad has always said to me, stick in school as long as you can. And my mum, she got a degree when she was really young. When she was my age, which is quite a while ago. She'll hate that when she hears this podcast. But I was quite really influenced by the pair of them to go and get a degree. So I didn't really think about it. When I came to my final years in high school, I just looked at whatever my best subjects were, and then I applied for a degree. Got my unconditional. 5 years later, I ended up getting 5 years ago I got my degree, and then a year and a bit after that I ended up getting a job which happened to be in that field. So my degree ended up being in physics because that's what I was good at school, and now I'm working in spectroscopy, which is a subfield of physics. So I think it's kind of worked out for me in the end, and we'll probably go into the details. But could you kind of an overview of that same process? If I don't know if your decision making was more thoughtful than mine.
I don't think so, to be honest, because I think we obviously both went into higher education, and I think when I was growing up, and I think you just said so as well, there was a certain amount of like pressure from like teachers and from parents and from people, your adults that were around you, that you should keep going in education.
Mm-hmm.
If you can go into higher education, you should go into higher education. That was the thought process that I had, and I knew that I could go to uni, so it was kind of almost assumed for me that I would be going to uni. Now, I think that higher education is probably a good idea for someone to go into, but I've since learned, that there are other options that have various pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, so I went to high school, I got decent grades, I was good at maths and I was good at physics, and I started in my 5th year, I started trying to figure out what I was going to go into. I wanted to do astrophysics, so I applied to do that at uni, but I was also told that it would be good to apply for something like engineering, which was more practical. And then I ended up doing a little bit of work experience with a company called Scottish Engineering in Scotland, and that basically decided that I wanted to go into engineering. It was a more sort of practical career. It was more job certainty and stuff like that. So I ended up just choosing the course that the guy who was sort of mentoring me told me to choose, because he was not really well off. He was a really smart guy, knew what he was talking about, and I looked into it and I chose that. So I got my unconditionals to go into astrophysics or engineering, and I chose engineering. Went to Strathclyde for 5 years, got my degree, and then immediately after my degree, I went into a job. I got a graduate job, and I started 2 months after I graduated. So I graduated in like May, and I was working by the start of July. Now, so we went into like quite different degrees. You went into quite maybe more of a theoretical degree.
Yeah, definitely more
physics.
academic.
Yeah, so more like academia, more equations, more theories and stuff like that. Whereas my degree is sort of more practical. So it was like an engineering side of things. It was about like materials and flows and more like sort of design, I guess. So it was in theory, yours was a sort of academic degree, and mine was like a practical course, I think.
Well, that is already the very first kind of distinction that I think we might have had in the process that we went through without even realising it, was that when I left high school, I was like acutely aware that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a couple of ideas actually. I actually initially wanted to work in a pharmacy. I don't know why, but for years and years, I think I was basically had this impression that it was a good job to go into if you wanted to become an entrepreneur. And I had these silly ideas when I was a kid. I eventually got a job in a pharmacy though, and realised that it was possibly the most boring job on earth. So by like the end of high school, I realised, oh shit, I actually have no idea what I want to do. So as I said, I was good at physics, maths, and chemistry, so I ended up choosing this degree in chemical physics, and it was one of those ones where, like you said, it wasn't practical. So I knew that when I was getting this degree, it wasn't going to lead to like a job. I wasn't going to be, well, it wasn't necessarily going to be a physicist. Although I imagine if you were approaching your job, you always knew that at the end of it, you're going to be walking away as an engineer.
Yeah, so when I took like the engineering degree, it was quite, I think that's a very good degree in terms of like job prospects afterwards. You know, it's a great degree to get. It was a tough one to get into, the course that I got into, and it's quite a prestigious degree to have. And when I left, I think the fact that I went to Strathclyde and did engineering probably got me in a few doors for a few interviews and stuff like that.
Really? Right. Okay. That is interesting. Yeah. So like that's probably like the first part of this entire process that makes things a lot. I don't know. I don't know how good that is. Like your decision you're making. It's because like obviously like engineering and like other degrees like maybe like medicine or like pharmacy. These are degrees where like when you leave high school, you're locked in to the career you want to, or that you'll eventually be working in. You don't have. I imagine it's not so bad for engineers. There's probably other fields that you could work in because an engineering degree has this like problem solving skills and stuff like that. But like like law, accounting, these type of things are you're going to leave with that decision made in mind. So you inherently have to make it at a much younger age. Whereas the option that I went with, which is studying something just like physics or maths, English, a language, I guess it kind of leaves like a broader range of opportunities at the end of the day.
Well, you say at least a broader range of opportunities, but it took you like a much longer time to get a job than it took me to get a job. You spent the year looking for jobs like after you left, and that probably be the first bit of advice, quote unquote, that I would give, and that I was probably told, and we were told at the end of high school to pick a course that we enjoyed, pick something that we liked. Now, while that is important advice, looking back, I would have also liked the advice, you should probably be picking a course that will have job prospects at the end as well, because, I did a certain amount of, equations and maths in my degree, and so did you. We just applied them in different ways, and I'm sure that you would have probably enjoyed my course as well.
Yeah.
If you did the mathematics in my course, you did the practical stuff, you liked physics, you liked maths at school, so it would have still been an enjoyable course for you, and you would have still got the same university experience as you got doing chemical physics,
right?
Maybe slightly different.
Yeah,
and you would have had a much better job prospect at the end. So that would be the first thing that I would highlight. Like, do the course you like, sure, but try to think about what you're going to do after as well, because if you do something that's not got great job prospects in the same field, like you might be at a bit of a loose end by the end of the course.
Yeah, that's like a real key point we'll just touch upon there, and have a couple kind of child conversations that almost that come from it, but it's almost like a no-brainer. It's like when you're thinking about what you want to do after high school, as much as you're thinking about what's going to be happening to you in the short term, you're really making a decision about the long term. And you ideally, like what I did was I just chose a subject because I liked it, and I was good at it, and the idea was that I'll get a good degree. But looking back, which I did, yeah, exactly, and that helped me get a job. And I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, like I wish I had some sort of awareness of what jobs really were available with the degree I had. And it's kind of a catch-22 because the idea is that it's like really broad, and you'll have choices available if you don't make that decision early. But like you said, like job prospects, they are one of the impressions that I had when I started applying to uni was that if I went to uni and I got like a first, I got a good degree. A first is like an A basically, and like a 2-1 is a B. I was always told, and this is like actually told me by my lecturers, was that if I got a first, I basically had this mad pick of jobs,
Yeah.
And I was told that if I got a 2-1, which is a B, I was like, I'd end up with a good job. And it's like, and that was just a bare-faced lie. And I think that's different for your and my degree, right? It's because, see, one of the things I've realised is that not every degree is born equal, and this is kind of what you're talking about with like job prospects at the end of it as well, because like particularly, I can only talk about my experience in physics, but when it comes to physics, see getting like a third or like a C and like scraping physics, basically, you may as well not have a degree. It's honestly that bad. It's like, see if you're going to go to uni and choose that route in life to try and get a degree out of it. At the end of the day, you're thinking to yourself, I'd get a degree and make myself more employable. You really actually want to be focusing on getting a good degree. Like you can't. I don't know if this is the same in engineering, but I saw the people in like my cohort in university that were like, they're everyone that chose the course of physics obviously is pretty fucking good at physics. They're not going to choose it because they're not good at it. But like when you start getting further into uni, things start getting really fucking difficult, as everyone that's been to uni is aware. By the time you start getting near the end, like it's supposed to be hard, and the value in getting like a better degree, either like putting in the hard work or just being naturally better at numbers or literature or whatever it is, will have a huge ramification on what you leave your university experience with.
Yeah, so when we talk about having a broader idea, a lot of the influence you get when you leave high school is from like teachers. And teachers are sort of doing their job as well. Their job is to get you to uni. Their job isn't to get you employed afterwards. So like when they're just telling you to pick a course that you like, because if you get into uni, it'll be good for their numbers. You know what I mean? So they don't really give you the whole picture where it's like you'll be doing something after that as well. So you're not really planning for that. You're only planning for the next 5 years. But to touch on the degree aspect, so the course that I went to, as far as I'm aware, there was a lot of people in my course. I think it was about 180 people in my course or something like that. And like I say, it was tough to get into my course. And I did a 5-year master's. And as far as I'm aware, nobody got a third. People either dropped out or got a 2-1, and that was it. The day that I graduated, everybody that graduated got either merit or distinction. Merit being 60% B and distinction being 70% A. Nobody in that graduated in the same day as me got below 60% across 5 years.
That might be like I think I'm the same position as you, but that's because I also did a master's, which is like a 5-year university degree course, and a prerequisite for us doing the master's, because it's an integrated thing. But in England, you need to do like your undergrad, which is 4 years, then your master's, which is postgrad, you have to pay for it. But in Scotland, they have this thing called an integrated master's, and you can do it all in one. But the prerequisite for my course was that you need to be on track for a 2-1 in order to do the masters. So everyone that got the masters,
it was the same for us as well. So having said that, I guess people could have dropped out in 4th year with a 2-2 or a third or something like that. Yeah, that could be true. But I think it was kind of the same. A lot of the graduate jobs that I seen required you to have a 2-1.
Right. Okay.
So when I was going through these websites, I went through I think it was like Target Jobs and
Grad Cracker was one
Grad
for me.
Cracker. Yeah,
Yep.
that was one of them.
Mhm.
A lot of the graduate positions I was applying for said minimum requirements 2-1.
Sure. Yeah. Same. I'm the same. And also, this is probably maybe a distinction between like the more practical degrees like yours and academic degrees like mine. But I also saw a lot of jobs which required masters specifically. It's like
Right.
a proof of further education, and this was kind of one of the points that I'd realised at uni, which I only really begun to realise once I was in the thick of it, and that was that like the concept of what a degree was worth in my head was like really overinflated. I think. I think once I was kind of under this impression, that once you've got this degree, like this is your ticket to a professional job. You're going to walk away from this, and I'm going to be fine. Like I didn't, like in high school, I didn't actually worry about what career I wanted because I'm like, I'm going to get a degree. So
Yeah.
I'll find a job. It'll be absolutely fine, and that was something that hit me and a lot of my friends hard at university upon leaving. Like you got to like your fifth year, or fourth year for like people that didn't do the masters. You got to your fourth year, your fifth year, and you're like, wait a second, I thought I would know what I wanted to do by now. I not only and so there's this whole question of not knowing what you want to do by the time you're near the end, but then there's the whole problem of actually trying to get a job, which was much harder than I anticipated.
Now we're discussing this, it's just going to hit me. The realization is just going to hit me that the reason that I think it's school that teaches us this. I think it's teachers, like it's the teachers that are trying to get you into uni. They want you to go to uni so that they can bump their school's numbers. So they give you, they probably paint this rosy picture in your mind of like, you go to uni, you get a degree, you get a job, when in reality it's like not like that. They kind of make out, like for me it seemed like uni was like the only option. It was like, yeah, you're
Sure.
you're smart enough to go to uni, so you will be going to uni, kind of thing.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm in the same
And like,
position as you.
Looking back now, if you were to go to uni and you were to get a third, an option that I didn't really know was available is, I probably agree with you. If you're to go to uni and you're to get a third, you probably should have went for an apprenticeship or
Right.
something along those lines. Like you should have tried to get some sort of training job instead, because it seems like if you don't achieve like a 2-1, a lot of these companies just totally disregard you. So what I'm seeing now, since I've moved into my workplace, there are a lot of technicians at my work that are doing like part-time uni, apprenticeship sort of thing. And that seems like a much better option for someone that maybe isn't cut out for university, because not a lot of people are. There were times at uni, I remember the exam periods where it's like 3 or 4 weeks of just sitting in the library revising for, and I'm literally all day, every day, going home to sleep, coming back to the library. There were tough periods in uni. There was a lot of upsides to it, but some people just don't enjoy it. They're not cut out for the school environment, but they would thrive in an apprenticeship, which wasn't really painted to me in high school. It wasn't really sort of put across as an option. It was kind of like, you're going to uni, when in reality there are more options for you to take.
Right. Yeah. That was kind of like one of the realizations I definitely had, was that in terms of like the picture that I was sold, and that I thought there was only like positives, but I realized that like, for particularly in my scenario, like applying to physics, if you want to, if your like key interest is being successful, you probably don't want to apply to physics. You probably want to apply to business or engineering or like some sort of medicine or something like that. Like, so I had this impression that any degree I'd walk out there with this fantastic job at the end of it, and I was also under the impression that you'd fall into this career, and to get back to that point that you were saying, like I totally agree with you. I think that for university shouldn't be for everyone, right? And these days it's our high school was like quite an underprivileged school, but like for like people that I went to high school uni with, like everyone in their year went to uni. Everyone, like the entire, everyone that made it to 6th year in high school, there was no doubt they were going to find a degree. And like it was just one of those things, like you have people studying things like fashion, or like you have like hundreds of people studying physics. It's like the world doesn't need that many physicists at the end of the day. And it's one of those things I genuinely do believe that like if you there's a lot of people that can get a degree, but just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that should be the option that you go for. And I saw tons of people that would have been like really, really talented, like as you said, like an apprentice to maybe become like a tradesman, or like people that become like applied. It's because like physics is like really, really theoretical and stuff like that, but it's still like a technical subject. So you can imagine someone that maybe had a flair for physics being like an electron, like a spark, you know, like a
electrician. Yeah,
electrician. There we go. Sorry. So yeah, I definitely agree that there was a complete lack of information that was presented to me about alternative options for people that had a good chance of being successful. You know, so the people that are going to stick in, the people that are intelligent, like it was very much being boxed into this university option.
it was almost like a sales pitch, like from teachers. It was like I remember the teacher that sort of got us into uni and guided us through the process, or the sort of, can't remember what our role was considered, but it was like the guidance counsellor for
I know
going
one.
to
Yeah,
uni.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was almost like a sales pitch from her to be like, oh, you should be going to uni, and like she was almost trying to like bump the school's numbers of like pupils that go to uni to make the school look better. And I remember at the time, like I see it in my UCAS application, which is the sort of website that you go through to apply to go to uni. On my application, like the paragraph or she had to write a small summary about me as a student. And in the summary, I remember that she put down that I was from a deprived area and I still managed to achieve good grades. And see, before that, I hadn't even like thought about the area that I lived in being deprived. It had never even occurred to me. That was the first time that really came across. And you and I have discussed this in the past a little bit about how we've now realised that, like, see, of the people around me, of the people that I went to uni with, and of the people that I'm now working with, the quality of person that gets a degree is typically well off.
Right.
Like, there are people at my work, and like, sometimes I'll have discussions with people that I went to uni with or people that I work with now, and they talk about money in a way that it is like trivial. Like, there's like a girl at my work that owns a horse.
right.
And I was like,
oh my god,
I can't even imagine having the money to own a horse, like as a family. If my mom had suggested that was crazy. We'd have had to like not put food on the table.
Right.
And like, there are people at my work who, like, there's a guy who turned around the other week, we're out at site, and he turned around and he was like, yeah, I just moved into this flat, my uncle owns it, I'm not paying any rent. And I was like, your family has property? Like, how much how much money is like kicking about here? And I've never truly realised like how uni is almost like gated by money. It's like difficult for people that are underprivileged to get into uni. And it was something that never occurred to me before.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It occurred to me when, because we have talked about this in the past, and I think it's incredible because, once I got to uni, all of a sudden I was surrounded by people that like had flats that were bought for them by their parents, you know? And like, for me, it was the fact that basically all of these people, they was just like, they came from high schools that so many people went to university. That was the one thing that gave it to me. And like, because in our high school, there was like maybe 15 of us that got to uni in the end.
Yeah.
Like, it was like a handful. Yeah. So like, it kind of makes sense that I guess from our perspective, it actually makes sense why we're being so railroaded. It's because for our school, like, getting those numbers was really important, right? It's like that's probably like a big percentage increase in the previous year, or you know, like these type of numbers we're talking about here, just getting an extra few people in the doors of university. And like, and as you said, I was sold. I was like totally and utterly, basically brainwashed into thinking that this was going to be just like smooth sailing. And I knew it was going to be hard to get a degree and stuff like that, but I really thought the act of university in itself would just sort me out, you know. And like, that's another thing as well. I was sold. So coming back to this conversation about the career prospects, like, part of the reason I took physics was because I was like, I don't really know what to do, but I'm good at physics. And I remember being told that like a career will just find you along the way. It's like, you know, something will happen. You know, it's one of those things, you know, you'll find something along the way that's got a really good interest in, and all of a sudden that's what you'll be doing. And it's like, I remember being in like the last year of uni and I was like, it's not happened yet. I still don't know. Like, the university has not given me any idea of what I want to do. It's just taught me physics for 5 years. That's
Yeah,
all I've
it's
done.
not like it's not because they're not worried about what you do after that. They're just worried about getting you to uni. So they're like, yeah, you'll figure it out when you get there. Like, don't worry about after until then.
Mm.
It's probably important for us to note as well, though, that university tuition is free in Scotland. Like,
That's very, very
yeah,
important.
so
Yeah.
in Scotland, the fees that you pay to go to university are paid for you through an organisation. So, and I know, for example, like in England, it is not, is it? It's something like $9,000 a year to go to university, I think.
Yes, that's right. And then they get their so we do get loans in order just to pay for our like survival. So like in Scotland, most Scottish students who will go to uni will be incurring debt of some form, but it's basically a lot better than pretty much everywhere else. It doesn't have free
Yeah,
university
it's
education.
like interest-free loans. It's basically an advance on wages that you're going to get after you leave uni,
That's exactly
because
right.
you only pay it back after a certain cut-off as well, after a certain earnings. So there's a bottom limit for when you pay it back. But if you and I had been living in England, like, I don't know if you would have or not, but my parents would not have been able to afford it
Yeah.
to go to university. So we're quite lucky, in fact, that Scotland even has that. You know, Scotland's probably one of the countries that does better at getting deprived kids to uni because it pays for it for them, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas it must be like in America and England, it's just locked off for some people. You know, you just can't get there.
Yeah. Oh, because as you said, it's expensive. You know, like $9,000 a year. This is money that I don't know. I guess people can get loans in England, but it won't be the same type of loan that is provided in Scotland. So it's hard. So you're right. I'm so privileged. I wasn't even aware of that actually. I hadn't really thought about the fact that for us it was so obviously a no-brainer. It's because we just weren't worried about the ramifications of loans and tuition fees down the road. And just again, for like we both have a master's, you know, and for someone in England that would be another extra year of tuition fees,
yeah.
which are probably more than a normal undergraduate year as well. So we've been really, really lucky in our country with what we've been able to do. And as much as we're talking about all these things that we're unaware of about degrees beforehand, I think you and I would probably agree that for us it clearly was the right choice. Like I look back and I'm really, really thankful for what I've done. And as I said, I do have a job in physics now, and I got a degree in physics, and I really enjoy that. And I didn't know if I was going to enjoy that up until the end, but it turns out I do.
Yeah, and to reiterate that, I fucking loved uni. It was a great time for me. You know, uni was like basically split up into two 12-week semesters, and the way that my physics, not physics, sorry, the way that my engineering course kind of was set up was that I had like coursework throughout the year. And then I had like 5 or 6 exams come the end of the semester. Now, I managed to just like, you know, I pretty much loved sleep, still love sleep. So when I had like a 9 a.m. lecture, that shit just wasn't happening. Like
No,
if I didn't have to go to it, I just didn't. And
Sure.
I managed to get away with sort of like cramming in these courseworks, like passing by in the courseworks, and I'm quite good at sitting exams. So. And like I say, like the 3 weeks before the exam started, I would just start revising the semester's content. And by the time the exams came around, I was like caught up enough to like do them. But those like 3-4 weeks were like stress filled,
Sure.
constant revision. But in reality, by the end of the year, I'd really only worked like 10 or 11 weeks, and I had like a whole lot of time off. And it doesn't even feel like wasted time because you're still getting your degree. So I went on a lot of nights out. I did a lot of like lazing around. I played a lot of video games in that time, and I just had an absolute blast. You know, it was great. During my first and second year, I was going out like 3 times a week. You know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I was going out and getting absolutely pished every single night.
Yeah.
And
it
was lit.
Yeah, it was absolutely lit. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more actually. I loved the actual getting the degree itself. I feel that uni can almost be gamed in a way. And I think it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's, I don't know, I think you and we both did well at university, and we're quite lucky to do so. It's because I know people that weren't able to, I think it's got a lot to do with how you're able to sit exams and like cramming, their ability to cram. I think that's in university, if you have that skill, and if you're one of those people that just does well on tests, you know, then uni, I actually almost feel that uni is not catered to you. It's because I know that I probably didn't walk away from uni with as much information that I should have if I've actually like done it properly and not skipped lectures up until the last several weeks before the exam and then crammed it all. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I still learned a huge amount, and I did go to a lot of lectures, but yeah, it's definitely possible to game it. But I wouldn't.
I fucking rode that line, you know, like a fucking, what do you call when they're walking, like the what do you call the walkers that walk across the wire with the pole and like going between buildings? Tightrope walkers.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I was like, I very much had the attitude of, I'm going to put in the minimum amount of work that I can to get the best degree that I can. Mm-hmm. So it was like, as long as I'm hitting that first cut off, like that's right. It. I'm going to put in as least hours as I possibly can to get a first, which is what I did, and I found that balance like really nicely. Like maybe about my second year, where I was putting in like as little work as I possibly could to get that like first, and that's kind of what uni's all about. It's about finding out how to achieve your goals. Like there's a bunch of like deadlines, and it sets you up for work quite well, because it gives you like deadlines, it gives you these dates that you have to have work completed by, it gives you the materials you need to do it, it kind of teaches you how to research, you know, there's all these things, and it kind of set me up for work nicely, especially in my fifth year was like deadline, and it was like a lot of like really high pressure weeks in my fifth year, which kind of like and work isn't even anywhere near as much pressure as that, but it set me up kind of nicely. The thing that I think was brilliant about uni though was the fact that it was such a social time. You know, for 5 years it was a time of like going out with my friends. It was like sort of like almost exploring who I was, you know, learning about myself, finding out who I am as a person, what I want to be like. You know, it was a really good social time for me personally.
Yeah, I'm the same, because I was one of those people that I think I really grew into myself at uni. I was not one of those that excelled at high school. So for me, I think the amount of growth from me like starting uni to leaving uni, I was like, I will forever be thankful for it. And yes, that's exactly right. As much as I obviously have got a lot of physics knowledge because it's a bloody degree in physics, the most important thing is like the soft skills that you get out of uni. You know, it's stuff like report writing, or like actually more importantly,
report writing. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, but like for me, it's just like how to prioritize your time. Like exactly like you said, I knew the amount of work that I had to put in order to get the result I needed in an exam. You know, and that's something that's really, really valuable. You know, and it seems like an obvious one, but these are the type of skills that you can transfer to the workplace, and this is why so many companies do want to see someone with a degree, because it kind of gives them some assurance that they've had a relatively self-regimented couple of years where they've been able to do these things for themselves. So I do think that yes, like it makes you great in terms of employability for like soft skills, but like the problem I have with uni was that this option for me, it made it so hard to get a job. It's because I was one of those, like, you know, such a trope these days, but like I was in one of those groups where it was like, you know, you need a minimum of 3 years experience to get this graduate job, you know, like I just had a degree, and you know, I was actually really, well, I say lucky, like I did like several projects over summer where I basically worked in a lab environment, so I did have more experience than a lot of people that are applying to these jobs, so I was luckier in a way. But uni was definitely one of those ones where, sure, it gives you these soft skills, but I definitely found that going to an actual working environment compared to uni was very, very different. Like, because sure, I learned how to report right, but just having to learn to like wake up every day and get in those doors at 9 in the morning and then leave at 5 at night, like that was not easy, you know, and that was something that uni did not prepare me for.
You're right. Uni does. So I reckon about maybe, my degree was over 5 years. I reckon about maybe 10 or 15% of my degree was actually just in report writing. It was in your ability to structure an essay. It was in your ability to structure findings in a way that you, like a concise way that reported results and stuff like that, which is great, because now my mum's actually just gone back to uni and she's writing reports, and I'm having to like teach her how to do it because
Right.
it's never something that she's learned. She's never learned how to articulate the things that she thinks,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm having to like go through her essay and try and explain to her that it's kind of a story, and you're having to like hit the points, like introduction, conclusion should mirror each other and answer the questions.
Yeah, the kind of the macro
stuff
structure
like-
to these things.
Yeah, but you are right though. I remember the first day that I turned up to my job. So obviously my sleeping pattern was fucked.
Did
It was
not exist. Yeah.
It did. Yeah, when I was in uni, it flipped. It went. I was like getting up and at night, like going to sleep during the day. Like so many times that happened. It like rotated itself round. The first day that I turned up to my job, I turned up at 8:30 in the morning, which was when I started. I had my induction, and by 12, I was at lunch. I was falling asleep at my desk.
Right.
Like I was literally trying to read the
On day
document they'd
one.
given me, and I was like nodding
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And then when I got home, and like 5:15 came around, and I staggered out to my car. I drove home, and I got home at 6 p.m. I instantly fell asleep.
That's right. Yeah.
I woke up at 9 p.m., had my dinner, fell back asleep, and then woke up at 7:30 the next again day to go back into work.
man.
Like
Yeah.
I slept the whole time, and that happened for 3 days.
Yeah.
3 full
After a
days
full
at
shift,
work.
that was
I
it.
did 8 hours at work, and then I went to sleep, and I slept for 16 hours, and then I went back to work, and then I slept for 16 hours. My body was not ready for a regimented program. It was
No.
not prepared.
Yeah. I know that. I totally agree. See, for me, it wasn't even like the regimented. Well, I get, yeah, it was the regimented part. It was the fact that seeing university, like, you know, like you had this option of just like not turning up that day. You know, you know, like the weather was a bit shit outside, or you know, I'd stayed up a bit late, so I'll just catch up. I'll get your notes later, type of thing. That was such a hard experience when it moved to the workplace. Just the mental knowledge of knowing that this is. I don't know about you, but I actually definitely, there was a transition for a couple of months when I started my job, and it was like almost like a pseudo depression where I was like, fuck, this is me every day. I'm doing this, you know, and I've got my weekends and that's my free time, but the rest of me, that's me every day, getting up, working and sleeping. And that uni, from going for a free environment like uni to that, was, I struggled with.
Now I've never struggled with that, although I was perpetually tired at work for I want to say 10 months where I was like falling asleep at my desk like literally every single day. I was like falling asleep at my desk, like just buzzing to get to Tesco at lunchtime to get a can of Monster, like, and then about 10 months in I discovered coffee.
Just like everyone else in the office needs to get through the day.
Yeah, exactly. So like I started drinking. I don't even like the taste of coffee. I
You just
don't like
need
it
it.
at all.
Yeah.
But I need it to like stay awake, and it's just propelled my career so much now.
Yeah. I've got 3 hours every morning where I'm productive.
Yeah.
So just trying to stay awake at the desk.
So like there are like elements of like workplace life that uni prepares you for, and there are like elements that it really sets you up badly for.
Mm-hmm.
Now in my workplace though, there like I say, there are a bunch of guys there that are like just out of high school that apply for like an apprenticeship, and they go in and they go to uni like 1 day a week, but they also do their job. Now I'm sure
Right.
there are like part-time courses like that everywhere, but there are also just jobs that are like apprenticeships, and those are like valuable as well, which is something that I didn't know then. You know, you see these guys and they're coming into work every day, they're getting into a working life routine. They like leave high school and they go straight into another routine, and that really sets them up in that regard. You know, it's never a struggle for them to get up in the morning because they
They've
have
done
to
it.
do it. They have
Yeah.
to do it every day, and they've done it for their entire lives. You know, maybe they're not great at writing reports, but they're better at other things. You know, and they learn report writing on the job as well. So there are like valuable things about apprenticeships and you're also getting paid for it. That's a
Right.
big one. You're not
Right.
accruing any debt. So there are like pros and cons to like both sides of the coin, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, that's probably like the last point I really want to talk about. Is kind of like the pros and cons of like an apprenticeship compared to a degree. It's because I think it's probably safe to say that if you and I didn't go for a degree in the end, we would have went for apprenticeships. And I don't know if you remember this, but remember when I was actively searching for a job between uni and where I am now, and there was at one point where I was going to apply for apprenticeship scheme. After going to uni and spending 5 years for a degree, I was like, this is the only way I'm going to get into engineering. You know, like there's no other way. So I definitely see the pros of apprenticeship schemes, and I think it's such a shame because it's one of those things that we just were not told about whatsoever at school. And there are a lot of serious pros, like you said, like, so you don't need to worry about debt for one thing, because you're being paid the entire time. Like, it can be a shit wage, but some companies do not, like the company that I work at treats our apprentices well. You know, they're sitting like 20 grand a year or something like that. It's a good wage. And on top of that, yeah, so no debt, and you're being paid at the same time, and as well, there's, as you said, like you're getting this real experience. And as much as it's great that you and I have like this foundational knowledge in our degrees, which is useful and probably makes us really good at learning new things, imagine if we just had 5 years of just working on the job, you know, type of experience. That's the type of stuff that employers go mad for. That's the type of thing that really makes you employable, I think, at the end of it.
I mean, it's a practical skill. If you get an apprenticeship, you're doing practical things from day one. You're learning the key things that they need from day one. You know, uni's it's a whole different like kettle of fish. And one thing that I will say for uni is that I would say that practically, if you want to like get the most out of life, if you want to be as successful as you possibly can, maybe an apprenticeship is the way to go, to try and get an apprenticeship at a place that you want to work at. You know, if you're really looking at the long-term goals, if you're looking at your employability after, if you're looking at, you know, being successful in your life, maybe an apprenticeship is the way to go. In the sense that it gets you in the door earlier. You'll be sort of further in your career before people that leave uni will be. Although I think the progression once you've left uni is faster than it is if you didn't go to uni. You know, you kind of you start at the bottom when you get a graduate job, but you progress quite quickly.
That's right.
Whereas if you get an apprenticeship, you do 5 years and you progress quite slowly, and then after that you're kind of at the same place, but maybe the progression wouldn't be as quick. Although one thing I will say for uni is, if you leave school and you go to uni, that's an experience that you're never going to get ever again. You know, it's you can go to uni later on in life, but the chances are you might be working. It might be a part-time thing. It could be a night course. I would never take uni back because it's an experience that I will only get once in my life, and I'm so glad that I had those 5 years and I got that experience. And see, to be honest, by the 5th year, I was like, okay, no more. I was like,
I hated uni at the end. Hated it.
By 5th year, I was like, I can't do another year of this. Like, I want a job now. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. The 5 years that I had at uni were some of the most enjoyable I've had in my life, I would say.
Right. Yeah.
It's probably a pure once-in-a-lifetime experience because you probably won't come back. And if you do come back, you'll be that old guy that's at uni, you know?
Yeah,
one of like the mature students, and well, there's nothing wrong with that. You won't get the same experience.
No. It is exactly right. It's to be like a young person at university, like moving out of house the first time, going to halls and having the nights out, joining up the unions. Like it's that's the part of uni that I would never ever trade. Like, as much as I got annoyed with the subject, and as much as I got annoyed with like the institution and the fact that I was getting this degree that I wasn't sold for, and I had all these like kind of issues about the whole process. Like, I've like met some of the best people in my life there, you know, like the experiences that I've carried out and the people that I've met is so invaluable. And like I guess that's kind of what I was thinking about when I was saying about like when you like leave the job and this is you're just working now. It's like that. You if you skip out in uni, then you're straight into work for till you're 70, you know, and it's an opportunity that's yeah, it's
like going into an apprenticeship or getting a job straight out of high school would probably be good for you professionally, but I think going into uni is good for you personally. It's almost a time of like total exploration. You know what I mean? It's a time of like finding out who you are. You know, there's going to be a time where like some of the things that you can do in uni, you can't do them anymore. You know, you can't go out on a Sunday night and you can't get drunk. You know, you can't. I'm sure there are droves of people that go to uni and they take all sorts of like drugs and they have all sorts of sex and they go out and they do like a bunch of stuff that they would just never do if they went into the workplace, you know. People that go out like Thursday night, student night, where like all the drinks are like 80 pence and you get literally the most hammered you've ever been every week, and you beat your personal record for how drunk you are like every week. Like
Mm-hmm.
those are experiences that you'll never get at work, because the people that go to work 5 days a week, they're fucking tired.
Can't do that. Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
fucking
Mm-hmm.
as of Friday night, you're tired. Like I mean, for a long time, I wasn't really able to do anything on a Friday night when I left work, because I was just so tired from the week that I kind of just wanted to come in and rest. Whereas at uni, you've got this like free time, and you've got so much time to go and explore who you are, figure that stuff out, figure out who your friends are, figure out, and you can go and figure out what you want to do as well. You know, if you really looked into that stuff when you were at uni, I'm sure you could have forged a path, but it was sold to us like it would just fall into our laps, which it never.
So I guess like that's what I'm kind of, the question I'm kind of asking myself is, now if you're the person, you're like leaving high school, your grades are like, they're okay, probably like you're not top of the class, you know, so you're not going to go to uni and excel, but you could make it in there. If you're in that kind of position where you're not exactly sure what career you want to go into, you're just thinking of maybe just getting a degree in physics, and you're probably going to slide through uni and manage it in the end. You might not be able to make it to the masters, you just get your 4th year degree and it maybe just be a 2-2 or something like that. Is spending 4 years holding off your career and getting this debt, is that worth it just for the spiritual aspect and like the in learning yourself? It's because that's the thing. I know people that did go to uni and they struggled and they didn't get the degree they wanted at the end of it, and they've figured it out. No one's like, they've basically set themselves back a couple of years just because they've had to like then finish their degrees either at a college institution or like finish getting a qualification in order to move into that world. So it's just taken a couple extra steps. So I'm kind of balancing myself. Like when we're describing uni at the very end there, it sounds just brilliant. Is there a reason why people shouldn't be if they're capable of?
I mean, I wouldn't just go for the sake of it. Like, you know, I wouldn't just it was kind of painted like that for us in high school, that we had to go to university, and we didn't even think about it. But my recommendation to people that were leaving high school now would probably be, you know, do you want to go to uni? Because I think I did want to go to university when I left high school. It was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to get the highest education I possibly could before I went into the workplace. But if you'd rather be getting paid or, you know, doing something like that, or you think if you hate school, you know, if you don't like being in the classroom, if you don't like teachers telling you what to do, then, you know, maybe uni isn't for you, and you should probably start looking at, you know, doing something for yourself. I wouldn't just go for the sake of it. But I can speak from a place of like great privilege, because first of all, it was free. Second of all, I chose a degree that got me into a job straight away. And third of all, I had a fucking blast while I was doing it. So uni was uni was almost a perfect experience for me.
Right.
But I appreciate that it's not like that for everyone, because I know that there are a lot of people that I know that went to uni and struggled through classes, like went in every day 9 to 5, and it just wasn't for them. They just couldn't do it. They just, you know, whatever it was about uni, whatever it was about them, it just didn't click. You know, some people don't want to sit in a classroom all day long, like listening to lectures and doing tutorials. You know. They'd rather be getting practical experience. Figure out what's right for you, and don't do it just because someone's told you to do it, or because you think it's what you need to do, or just go for the sake of it. Like, don't do that. I would probably encourage you to have like a bit of a deeper thought about it, but it's difficult at that age because you're like 17.
Well, yeah, that is a problem. Yeah, I think my advice would be like, don't go for a degree. You know, if there's a subject that you're genuinely passionate about, I still think that, and you have like you have like good prospects in this area, and you're really interested in it, I think you should still degree is probably a good option for you. I think if you're having a career in mind, then you don't need to be listening to this podcast. You're probably going to do exactly what leads you to that career, so you're in a lucky position. And I guess like the last bit of advice I was always would think a little bit about apprenticeships. It's because now that I'm in the workplace and I have an awareness of them, and I know that the things that they entail, like I've seen so much value in them, and it was one of those things that I thought like apprenticeships were like, oh, it's for folk that can't make it to uni type of thing. It's like no, there's definitely something there, and I still totally believe that I made the right decision, but yeah, I think these are the type of points that I wish I thought about. See, to be honest with you, now that I've had this conversation, I think I would have made the exact same decision. You know, I think I'd probably still be where I am. Yeah, but it's good to just think about the decisions and the crossroads that were passed without maybe even realising that they were passed at the time.
Yeah, the overarching thought that I just have about the whole thing is when I go into work now, having done my 5 years at uni, having enjoyed myself and having gotten a lot out of it, I go into work now and I see the technicians that are there and they're getting the same degree that I got, and they're also working their asses off. Like,
Oh,
at
it's
work
hard.
at the same time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it just makes me think to them, like, they've never experienced a Thursday night out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They've never just decided, I'm not going to go in this Friday, I'm just going to go out and get drunk and skip my classes, you know.
Unthinkable.
There's a whole bunch of like experiences that you just never had, you know. And now I'm in the workplace, I'm getting the same experiences that you've had. I'm getting them now, and I've also had this whole other branch, you know. It's personally, from my perspective, uni was fantastic, and I would recommend it as a time for everyone just to go out and experience it, you know. You've got plenty of time to make money in your life. You can do that when you're like 25, you know. Right. Money will come if you pick a good degree that has good job prospects at the end of it, and you really knuckle down and get a good degree. You will get a good job, you know. If you do all that and you really apply yourself, that will come down the road if you really put your mind to it.
Yeah.
Uni for me was about the experience, and I definitely wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. I would. Yeah, just to say at the end of that, yeah, definitely character building. That's the key one, isn't it? It's just like all these. Yeah, I would not be the person sitting before you right now without for uni. I came into myself, like I became so much more confident, and it led me to work in this career that I love, and I met my girlfriend there, and I met the best friends there. So I cannot would ever advise anyone against it. Look at it that way. But yeah, that was a. I guess that kind of sums up our thoughts. I guess that kind of sums up our thoughts on unis. Like it's kind of a hard one, because we've both had such positive experiences. I don't think we could ever advise against it for anyone. But I kind of think that we try to at least cover topics that that should be considered, you know.
Yeah, I would just be aware of the sales pitch that your teachers are maybe giving you about university, you know. It might not be the option for you, and you know, telling a 16-year-old child to like look into things a bit more is probably not going to go well. But
it's not going to happen. Yeah, but
yeah, that's the choice you're making at that age, I guess.
Sure.
Okay, I've never took the time to like sit and think about the choices that I made like that. Like, we've never had this conversation before. I've never like looked back and thought to myself, should I have taken the other road? So yeah, that was a kind of good one in retrospect to look back on. So topic that I've been thinking about this week is a bit more topical, I guess. And I'll give a bit of background on like why I've been thinking about this as well, because I think everyone's got like an experience like this, and everyone's met someone who has said something that's been like racist, you know, whether it's like a grandparent, or whether it's like your parent or someone you know. Like, they say like racist things. There's like racism is like almost like in our culture, and recently, especially in the UK, you know, we just recently in 2016, recently 5 years ago now, the UK voted to leave the EU. Now this was like a really contested debate between like two sides. It was kind of similar to Scottish independence, and you and I voted differently in the Brexit referendum, I think. So we'll have like different perspectives on it. So the UK decided to leave the EU. They voted to leave, and I can't help but think that a lot of the discussion around why we should leave the EU was to do with immigrants. You know,
right? Yeah.
When that was occurring, there was a lot of talk, because the party that was kind of leading that debate was kind of the UKIP party,
right?
And I think a lot of their policies were like keeping the UK, like it was the UK Independence Party. And I think a lot of people thought they were like racist and stuff like that, and they had a lot of like negative thoughts on immigrants. So that seemed to be like a driving force in that argument. Now, I voted for Brexit, and I guess immigration was like a part of the reason that I voted for it, but it definitely wasn't the main driver. Like, I believe that countries kind of operate better as like smaller entities. So if the UK was to leave the EU, it can kind of control itself and regulate itself a bit better, and it wouldn't be sort of a cog in a big machine, if you know what I mean. Because if the EU votes for a policy for the EU, the sort of influence that the UK has over that is like very small compared to the entire EU. So like there's like policies and things like that maybe we don't want to sort of be in, that we don't have to be in. And my thoughts are that if we leave the EU, we can still have these policies if we want. We just get to control whether we do have them or not. And it was the same thing with like Scotland. I think Scotland should be independent, and I wouldn't want them to rejoin the EU either. I would rather it was its own thing. It controlled itself. It had the infrastructure to regulate itself. However, a lot of the arguments for Brexit were surrounding immigrants, it seems like, and there seems to be a lot of like people hating on immigrants. So first of all, I want to talk about maybe the pros and cons of immigrants and how we kind of feel about them.
Okay. Wow, that was a lot, by the way. Just want to clarify. I think we actually might agree. I think we might have voted the same thing for Brexit. I think it was the referendum which I voted to preserve. I think we did both vote to leave the EU.
Right.
And
okay.
Just going forward in the conversation. But yeah, please continue.
Yeah. No. So I just wanted to see what you think about immigrants. Like, what are the pros? What are the cons of them? And how you feel about them?
Okay. Well, I just want to make a big disclaimer here that I'm very unknowledgeable when it comes to this. Like, it's like you said at the very beginning.
I thought you were about to say I'm a fucking racist.
yeah, I am just the world's biggest bigot.
Episode 5,
it comes out finally. So like I think like, see, it's like kind of what you're touching on at the beginning there. Conversations with like immigration, it's kind of like a family topic. You know, it's the type of thing that comes up at Christmas dinner. You know, when people start shouting about it, and I've not really been exposed to that environment. Like, I don't have a really strongly formed opinion on immigration. Like, to myself, I can give you a couple of general things at the top of my head. You know, like, it makes sense that we should be trying to get skilled labour in the country and outsource, right? So immigration, that's a tick. I don't think we should be letting everyone through the borders. So, no. I believe there. I guess like from like the UKIP party perspective, I understand the need to solidify a British identity at the cost of eroding that to foreign culture identity. But other than that, man, those seem like reasonable points to me, you know.
The thing about this topic is, you know, what you're saying, the disclaimer that you said about not knowing a lot about the topic, that's everybody in the country. See, everyone seems to have an opinion on immigrants, but as soon as you say to them, why do you think that? Or, like, as soon as you ask them any questions, they immediately crumble. Like a house of cards, the whole thing just comes falling down, and they have no idea why they like are saying the things that they like.
Why they believe this, yeah.
Why they believe it, exactly. So I agree with you. There's a benefit of immigration, that people will come into this country that are skilled workforce. They'll do the jobs that are here that we need. You know, there's an element of that. We get doctors, we get sort of cleaners, we get nurses, we get all these things that kind of come in. Yeah, people that have like skills that we need in the country that we're lacking. So it's good in that sense. They can provide benefit to the country. You know, the cons of immigrants are probably like illegal immigrants, the immigrants that you get that like aren't coming here legally. There's also seems to be a big argument about like what they receive when they get here as well.
Yeah, welfare is a thing, isn't it? Yeah.
But generally, I feel quite positively about immigration. You know, I don't mind people coming here. Like, I think there are basically two main requirements that you should have if you want to come here, and it should be that you work to pay your own way. You know, you pay your taxes. As long as you've got a job and you're paying your way in the system, I couldn't care less. And I think you should also be fluent in the language. I think those are the only two requirements I would say for immigrants of any country. You know, you don't leech off the system. You come here and you kind of pay your way for a certain amount of time until you're considered a citizen, and you be able to communicate with the language that we have here. Because, you know, I wouldn't move to Spain and expect them to speak English to me. You know, I would move over there and I would get a trade, I would get a job, and I would learn Spanish. You know, that just seems like commonplace to me. Now, when it comes to immigrants, people seem to have a problem. So and it was a main talking point in the EU referendum.
It
So
really, really was. Yeah, from my experience, just wanted to say there for the viewers, like the immigration topic was definitely one of like the headliners. It was in like newspapers all the time. I can't stress enough how much people seemed to talk about it. I don't know how much it influenced the vote, but it was a highly topical issue at the time.
yeah, so first of all, I wanted to talk about what the EU policy is for free movement for people to go across the borders, because
Okay.
people don't seem to know or understand. They don't think this is what it is. When they talk about this, they seem to think that it's something else entirely. They seem to think that anyone can go anywhere and do whatever they want, and that's just not true. So there's like a lot of like myths and like speculation about immigration that people that voted for Brexit seem to believe, or at least that's how it comes across to me. So I've got the free movement EU national requirements up just now on the page. So it says here, EU citizens are entitled to look for a job in another EU country. Yeah, well, that's fine. I don't think we'd have any problems with that.
No, that's me specific.
Work there without needing a permit. So they're just breaking down the barriers for you to be able to work there. I'm like,
Okay.
I'm all for that. If you want to come and get a job, that's absolutely your prerogative. Reside there for that purpose. So stay here while you're working. Also breaking down the barriers. Fine. Stay there even after employment has finished. Now that one's a little bit precarious, because it's like, well, how long is that employment period to just work for 3 months and then stay?
For the rest of life type of thing,
Not entirely sure about that one. That's probably one of the ones where you could think, okay, maybe you have like an issue with that. Because if someone stops working, they should probably have worked here for a certain amount of time before they become a citizen are entitled to stay. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, but it also makes sense that once you're in a workplace, the idea is that those skills that you got will be transferable, and you're likely to work somewhere else. So yeah, I agree with you. It could be contentious, but reasonable, very reasonable.
Yeah, as long as you stay in work, I've not got a problem with you being here, basically. And the last one is enjoy equal treatment with nationals in access to employment, working conditions, and all other social and tax advantages. So basically, you get the kind of the rights that people get for working here, because you are entitled to work here. Now, when people talk about immigrants, they often talk about like stealing jobs, first of all. Now, if an immigrant comes here and gets a job from the EU law allows them to do that. So they're not stealing anything. So
yeah, it's not illegal.
yeah, these people seem to have like a problem with the immigrants themselves when they are like acting totally legally. Their problem isn't with immigrants. Their problem is with the law that allows them to be here.
Right.
So like, first of all, the people are thinking, I don't like immigrants, and it's like, well, there's no reason for you not to like someone who's just chasing a better opportunity, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
If you want the jobs to stay in the UK, like, talk about the law. Don't talk about the people that are like using it to get here.
Yeah,
right?
like people. Well, yeah. As I said, I don't think I've really properly met anyone that's thought that. It's because like that. What you're describing is literally just racism. I hate them because they are other. There's no damn reason that their intentions are inherently good. They're trying to increase their own position in life. They're trying to go to a better, like Britain's a brilliant place. It's very, very free, very forward thinking. There's no like religious persecution. There's great jobs. There's possibles for succession. Like an immigrant moving to the UK can, well, at the end of the day, it's legal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, what they're doing. But it's, from my perspective, it's almost like a noble thing. It's because they're taking a massive risk and leaving the country that they're born in order to have a completely new start. Well, I'm imagining this, like when I'm talking about immigration, I'm talking about people that come from like less developed countries that come to Britain and then basically have this like new start for themselves. Is that the majority of Britain immigration that Britain sees, or do we see a lot of people from developed countries moving over here? Like,
well, this is specifically for the EU, for the countries that are like in the EU. So I was talking about in relation to Brexit. Like, you're allowed to just basically work in any country in the EU without a permit and stay there while you have work, basically.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. At the end of the day, I don't. Yeah, I think people that have a problem with immigrants because they are immigrating are just idiots.
Yeah. So I'm kind of another one of the things that they seem to say is they talk about how immigrants come here and like steal benefits as well. Now, that probably is one that we're like, okay, if you haven't been here for like a long period of time and you're not paying taxes or whatever, If you kind of come here and you're just arrived, you probably shouldn't be able to get benefits. I don't think that, like, it's like we always say, if two reasonable people come and talk about this, you're not going to get too much contention.
Mm.
You know, if you say to someone, should an immigrant be able to claim benefits when they get here? I don't think anyone's going to say yes to that.
But I think we probably aren't talking about immigrants anymore. We're now talking about asylum seekers, right?
Right, which is another point that I think is key. Some people mistake immigrants for asylum seekers, which is another thing that they can't distinguish between. They just see them all as like one big bubble.
Yeah, right.
So, first of all, the benefits available to an immigrant. Once you're here and you have been here for 3 months, you're able to claim like job seekers allowance, like income-based job seekers allowance.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
I can see how that might be another point of contention, where if you'd only been here for like 3 months, and then you're then claiming benefits, it's like, well, you haven't been here for a proportional amount of time and
For the amount of money
contributed
that
to
you're
the
taking.
system for the amount of money that you're taking. So I can see that also being a problem.
Yeah, that actually is a drain on resources, which is what these people seem to be complaining about.
Yeah. So those are the two main factors. They seem to be like job stealing and about claiming benefits. Now, you're right. When people talk about this kind of stuff, sometimes I think they mean asylum seekers, but they can't distinguish between that either.
Right.
And issues kind of arise between that. So what would you consider to be an asylum seeker?
I can only give examples, I suppose. I know that someone fleeing a country for religious persecution can come to the UK and be sheltered as an asylum seeker. And I think that's probably the same for war-torn countries. So, like we had asylum seekers from Syria. I've heard in the news at one point. Yeah, that's all I can think of.
It's pretty much that. It's pretty much someone that's fleeing a country to go to another country to sort of seek safety.
Okay.
So currently in the EU, I don't think there are any laws that stop someone from going into like a specific country. So there's no law that specifically says you can't apply to seek asylum in a specific country. So another thing I hear people complaining about are like people that come through like 6 or 7 countries to get to the UK.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
First of all, there's no law against it. And as soon as you ask someone about it again, their argument kind of crumbles to dust, because there's actually this thing, this EU sort of legislation, which is called, I think it's like the Dublin Initiative or something like that.
Okay.
The Dublin regulations, which means that countries can sort of dispute ownership over asylum seekers based on the fact that they've entered another country, and they can sometimes get sent. If you can prove they've come through another country and not like sought asylum there, you can like, if you can prove that, they can like get sent back to that country. So there actually is a law in place to send asylum seekers back that go through these countries. There's like I think Germany and Sweden have actually just currently suspended this regulation because they're seeing a lot of refugees from like Syria and stuff like that. So they're kind of taking more people on, sort of proportionally to help. So what the issue there is, people sort of mixing up between asylum seekers and like just actual immigrants.
Yeah.
Now, I was looking up something in that as well. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, what do you think about the concept of asylum seeking? Is it, I guess it would be immoral to say that you didn't want your country to do it, but I don't know.
That is kind of my thought on it. My thought on it is, these people they have like human rights. And we, as a nation of people that that don't have the struggles they have, these people are fleeing their homes and their countries. These are serious issues that are happening in their country that they're fleeing from. So I think we do have an ethical responsibility to take on some of the people that flee into the country, I would say.
Interesting, right? I see where you're coming from in terms of like the ethical responsibility, and I know that the argument that people give to that basically is that they believe that our government should have our citizens' minds, our citizens' well-being at the forefront. So the idea is that they shouldn't, like, people have a problem with people fleeing other countries and going and taking up, for instance, positions or welfare funding that wouldn't be provided to a Brit.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problem comes where people are seeing people in this country that are suffering, and there are a lot of people in this country that are sort of in poverty, that are like struggling, and they see us taking on other people as well, and they almost like shift the blame that maybe should be on the government, and they shift that onto these people that are coming into the country. And I think the government is like okay with it. You know, I don't think the government is like that bothered about people like not enjoying immigrants, because it kind of takes a lot of the spotlight away from like their personal responsibility.
Yeah. They'll need to make less hard decisions if people are too busy getting angry at a group of people instead of getting angry at a government body, right?
And you see it like on the news and stuff like that as well. I remember there was a couple of months ago I seen a news report that was like people that were sailing across the channel in like a dinghy that were like sort of asylum seekers. Now they clearly hadn't come from like France. They were from like Turkey or Syria. It was somewhere like that. They clearly travelled a long way to get to the UK. Now there was like a Conservative MP on the news channel, and he was talking about how many countries they'd gone through to get to this location, and it's almost like there was like 6 people like on the dinghy. It was like, how is this making like the 10 o'clock news? You know, this issue is like so trivial. How many people live in poverty in Britain? Like, are these 6 people really contributing to like a mass problem here? Are they really draining as many resources as like the rest of these problems?
I think that the reason that makes a story is because it might highlight to us how much people want to move to Britain. Because like these people, they could have stopped at Spain, they could have stopped at France, they could have stopped at Italy, but like they went this immense journey that would have been so dangerous and deadly. Like I can only imagine being at sea for that amount of time in a fucking dinghy. But like they chose to do that, and they chose to go all the way around Europe just to make it to the UK. And I guess it kind of puts into perspective the desperation that some people will move to hear about. And I think that's what might make the story kind of flash more in people's minds. It might not be the number, but it's just like the feather that clearly some people that are seeking a better life are willing to go to. And it is interesting that they would choose Britain given how difficult it is to reach Britain, right? We are an island at the end of the day.
Well, you would think that, but people aren't flooding to get to Britain. So the people, like, it seems like the news and these MPs would like have you believe that people are like completely struggling to get to Britain, and they're actively trying to like come here, when that's actually just like not the case. Britain isn't like disproportionately affected by like refugees or by asylum seekers.
I wouldn't have thought so, no.
So I've got an article here on the Amnesty website, and it says by the end of 2014 the global refugee population stood at about 14.4 million people. And if it talks about how they discount the 5 million Palestinian refugees, and it says that countries like Turkey and Pakistan host more refugees than all EU countries combined.
Yeah.
And it says, except for Turkey, no European country appeared among the top 10 hosts of refugees at the end of 2014. So within the EU, like I say, Sweden and Germany are leading the effort. Like I say, they've suspended this Dublin regulation. And France is a bit behind them. But France still receives twice the number of asylum claims than the UK does. Like, every year. That's like mental, and I think there's like an odd sense of like pride that's going on in Britain, where people seem to think that this country is like so brilliant that people must just like want to come here, and we shouldn't just be letting anybody in, when that like isn't the case. So like why are people thinking that?
Yeah, well, I'm not at all surprised to hear that our levels of immigration aren't through the roof. It's just because when you think about the geography, it must be so much harder to get here at the end of the day. Like it's so much easier for us to regulate the flow of people, because they either need a plane or to go through one tunnel, you know. So I although I might be conflating like illegal immigrants with actual immigrants, is because my thought process was that I would expect, of course, many more refugees to be like harbored in like Germany, because they're like Syria. You can walk from Syria to Germany, so it makes a lot of sense that they'd be getting most of the refugees. So So no, I'm not surprised to hear that Britain doesn't have a huge number of them. But when it comes to the reason that people worry about the numbers, I actually have this kind of, I guess it's kind of a theory that like a huge amount of our national identity has actually been derived from the fact that we're an island nation. Like, see, just the fact that we have always been surrounded on all seas by the ocean, and everyone in this land has been a Brit. You know, it's like we've kind of evolved this like really isolationary national identity that's kind of resulted in us having like a much stronger sense of self, as opposed to, imagine like Poland. You know, like I'm not at all for trying to say that Polish people aren't like nationally proud or anything like that, but they're surrounded on all sides by other countries, and like there's borders that are patrolled as much as any other European country, but there is free movement, and in the cases of like illegal immigration, it's easy to pass between these countries. So there's kind of like a diffusion of cultures and nationalities across these borders. Where in the UK we've just never had that. You know, you had to get on a boat.
Yeah, do you think it maybe has something to do with like the UK's like history as well? Because I know that the British Empire was once a massive force in like the world, and like so Britain maybe like, it controlled like a large portion of the world at one point, I think, and like now it's sort of like receded right back to its own borders again. So, do you think there's like an element of almost like the sort of Trumpism we see in America of making America great again? Do you think people are seeing the same sort of thing in Britain, that we're almost like it's a prideful thing and we're like we don't want to like make Britain any less white or anything like that?
I I don't think it's got anything to do with white, but I think people do intertwine the concept of being British with the concept of being white, and I think this is just such an outdated, bad, archaic concept. Just because what I think the problem seems to be that people look around at the country that they're in, and they think it's becoming less British, and like Britain, we're a proud country, at the end of the day, and I think people in Britain have a lot to be proud of, because Britain's a brilliant place and it's really, really progressive, and it has this, as you said, like it has a relatively recent epic history compared to a lot of other places. So there's like reasons for this pride in the first place, and the whole like concept of like British values is like slowly almost like being receding, and I think people have this impression that Britain is taking on others at the expense of themselves. It's like, and I think people have a real problem with seeing basically that decay, and it's not necessarily Britain's fault. It's because they basically they take on all these people, and what I think our government does is they try and accommodate them by supporting their culture and like trying to make them represented and stuff like that. And I think that the problem people have is that effort is at the expense of what was there before.
Okay, so you think that people in Britain see a decline in what they inherently believe is British by people coming into this country?
I guess so, or maybe less. Maybe more. They just feel that. I don't know. I might myself be conflating different issues here, to be honest with you. But I do feel that people are losing what Britain used to be, and like that's the thing. It's an ethereal concept. It's and we can't say what Britain used to be. I personally think that's actually like the government's fault for not pushing British values. Like I think that that's something that should be strongly encouraged, and I think that for new people that enter the country, they should be encouraged to think about these British values and be proud of them. Because at the end of the day, like they chose to come here. They want to come here for a reason. It's not, they didn't end up here as a fucking fluke. They wanted to start a new life in Britain. They're probably very happy to be here. I can imagine that they're extremely proud to be where they are compared to what they've come from, escaping persecution in whatever landscape. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think that people are not seeing it.
I think that there must be an element of the fact that the country is like not the way people want it to be, right? Like people must be like looking around Britain and not seeing what they want to see. And specifically the reason why people say these things but don't think about what they're saying is they look around, they see the country in a bad state, they hear bad things, they think something bad is going on, and the first thing their brain does is look around and think, what's different? And immediately, like, your reaction is to go, I can see different things here. You look around and you're like, not everyone's white here anymore. That's the problem.
Yeah, it could be, what's that, correlation versus causation? You know, where one, just because two things have happened at the same time and followed a similar trend, does not necessarily mean they're related. Like, the classic example is that there tend to be more murders. The rate of murders in America goes up as ice cream sales go up. And that's not because people, and you probably know
fucking
what I'm going.
Sugar rushes, that's what
Yeah, it's quite fucking mental. Yeah, it's not because people are going mad in ice cream. It's because it's warmer weather makes people more irritable. So you tend to see there's like a common factor that these issues are related to. Like, well, and that'll probably be in this case like governmental policies and decisions where we are seeing a rise in, because like we come from Scotland, and Scotland is still very predominantly white. There's most people that live there, but like in London, it's like it's a boiling pot, an absolute boiling pot of cultures and like ethnicities, and just so much change and cultures that I think people must, as you said, like, there have to. It's such a massive change. I can certainly understand how these things can people can think like the government is, well, the world's fallen to shit now. There's a lot more immigrants. Therefore, immigrants bad. You know, that I would not put that past.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's the first thing that they see. As soon as they open their eyes, they look around and like they can't think of what the problem is, so they just equate it to the first thing that they see. That might be an issue. I've always thought this concept of like pride to be a bit, I want to say stupid, like pride of like what you are. So I've always been proud to be Scottish, but I've never really known why. Like, it's a pride that's inside me. I like being Scottish. I like being from here. I like having ginger hair. It's a proud thing for me as a person. But it seems so silly to me to be proud of that, because it's not something that I've like done or chosen or earned. You know, it was just I was literally just happened to be born here. I happened to have ginger hair, but it's something that I'm inherently proud of. Like, where's that even come from?
I don't know. I don't think that. I don't think that's unnatural. I think that makes perfect sense. You can be proud you can be proud of circumstance. You know, like it's not something you've earned or you're achieved. But at the end of the day, you are like born in Scotland, and there's a great legacy of people born in Scotland before you that done things. And no, I don't think it's unusual to think to have a sort of pride there. I was probably in a similar boat to you, where I kind of didn't get it. I was quite scared, proud of being Scottish, but I was like, why? Like, what's the point of the rest of that? Like, what's the point of being British? Like, well, I'm not proud to be from a British person and all that type of jazz. But now I definitely feel actually there's just like a good thing. But it very much has like a double-edged sword. You know, like I think it's good, for instance, that people have values, and for those values to be like kind of driven by the government. I would love, and the government has actually said what British values are, and I'd want these things to be pushed in schools and that type of thing, because I see that as like glue, you know, like glue that holds everyone together. Like we have like people coming from all over the countries, like all these immigrants and all these asylum seekers and stuff like that, but like, see, once they're here, they're British asylum seekers. You know, I don't care what country we're from. Like, you were Syrian and now you're a British Syrian. You know, and that's something that we should all be really, really proud of. We because we want you here and you want to be here. So why can't we just look around and realize that we're both happy with this situation? You know, and then once that's the case, then maybe all these people that see immigrants coming in, they're like, we're losing what it means to be British. Maybe as a result of that, they'll see, instead of seeing these people as immigrants, they'll see them as British people. You know,
it makes me wonder what these people who are complaining about immigrants, what do they think are the values of this country? Because if I was to sum up Scotland, you know, if I was to think about the values that Scotland holds and like the reasons to be proud of Scotland, the first one I would think of is like freedom.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Freedom is probably the top value of this country.
And acceptance, you know.
Exactly. What are these people?
And the third one is law. What the fuck? Like, this is I don't understand. It's totally the opposite of what we have reasons to be proud of.
It's like you can only be free as long as you're Scottish. It's like,
yeah, yeah. Like, you know who brought charities to the world? That was Britain. We introduced hospitals during the British Empire to the world. We invented the concept of charitable foundations. We came up with law and acceptance, and now all of a sudden we're in this weird fugue state where we've like warped those values into this like us and them mentality.
it's almost like counterintuitive. Like, what do these people that are like against immigrants for, like, reasons that I think it's safe to say they can't even back up. I think it's fairly obvious if you do any sort of digging that Britain doesn't have an immigrant problem. Like, what is the values that these people are thinking that immigrants are working against? Is it just the idea that they're bringing their culture here and trying to impose it here?
I think you maybe hit it on the head earlier, where they're just looking for like a bad guy or a scapegoat, and the government actually might be quite happy for that to happen. Like, because I agree. Like, there's no real reason. Like, there's nothing wrong with a government saying that we want to put policies in place that like, control immigration. That's fine. There needs to be laws at the end of the day, but yeah, I can only assume that this like current mindset that's been adopted is one of those more primal, trying to find a reason for the problem. It's because it's like you said at the very beginning of the conversation. It's one of those conversations where you sit down and you quickly realize that everyone kind of feels the same about this. So why are the views that you hear about so vitriolic?
Yeah, it's so crazy to me because it is a topic of contention for some reason. And when I have family gatherings, when people start to have a drink and whatever, two opinions always cross wires, and then all of a sudden it's like this argument. And if you sat down two people and spoke to them about what you think immigrants should be, the rights they have, and the laws they get, they come to like the same conclusion.
Right.
Even though it's like an argument, like you sit them down and you're like, well, what do you think about illegal immigrants? And they go, no. And it's like, okay, do you think people should get benefits as soon as they come into the country? No. It's like, okay, we agree on that as well. And you go through all these like issues. Do you think we should accept asylum seekers? And they go, yes, but we probably shouldn't just let anyone like move across these countries to get here. And it's like, yeah, well, that's the law in place. Law. Like,
right.
People seem to have this idea, and I think that was quite a big bit of propaganda, like during Brexit, that the EU has these really bad immigration laws, and in reality, it doesn't. Like, people seem to think that there's like freedom of movement across the borders, and you can just do whatever you want. You can come here and claim benefits, and like you can't do those things. So like, I don't understand why people like can almost convince themselves you can.
Well, this comes back to episode 2, man. I'm not convinced they were convincing themselves. I'm convinced that there was companies out there convincing them that immigration was bad, so that they would vote for Brexit.
Oh, okay. Well, why do you think companies wanted to like Brexit?
I don't know, man. But obviously, people wanted Brexit to happen. There was a campaign that was lobbied by private people. I don't necessarily understand how people were going to make money out of Brexit, but it was pretty obvious that people were, to me, right? Like, that with change. This isn't like an opinion. This is just true. If there is change in a market, there's opportunities to make money. Sure. And I think that basically a lot of people that wanted Brexit to happen, they saw opportunities that were applicable to them to make money. What's that got to do with immigrants? Oh, it's that one there.
It just seems so odd to me that people seem to become from this point of like pride, and I don't really understand that. And then, if anyone does display any sort of opinion on immigrants, and you ask them like one question, the whole thing just like comes crumbling down. And it's like it's almost like people just take the surface value on this like issue. Like they don't bother even like thinking about what they're saying. They just open their mouths and they just let the first thing that they think just come out. They don't bother to dig deeper on the surface. Like, it seems pretty obvious to me that Britain doesn't have this overwhelming immigrant problem like people would have you believe. There are probably, and I think maybe England has a bit more of an issue than Scotland does when it comes to immigrants.
Yeah.
But there's probably like a lot of people in this country that just like work hard and come here and make a living for themselves and just get on with it, and they seem to be getting a lot of like hate for that, even though the law doesn't necessarily allow them to do that any easier.
Yeah, I guess probably fundamentally it might have something to do with like disenfranchisement with the government, where people, I guess people basically think that the government or the powers that be are not giving them the attention, or like or they basically feel like they've been forgotten by society, and they're seeing people from other countries that clearly aren't being forgotten because they're being like accepted in, and there just must be that must be like one of the core places where this kind of frustration results from, right? Is the people that feel that they've been forgotten.
Yeah, it comes back to what I said earlier about, I think there are a lot of people in this country that are in poverty themselves, and people think that we're disproportionately helping out other countries instead of like helping our own country. And it just seems to me like the hate that's being distributed towards immigrants is like totally misplaced. It's almost like smoke and mirrors from the government.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking here. Like, I'm actually at the end of this, I'm kind of thinking like I have a problem with the government's inaction on this issue, right? Like, because surely it's in their favor for more immigration. That's why the government does it in the first place. Like, why do we have these fucking riots and political campaigns that are happening over something that seems to be like a concept of, it seems to boil down to just like communication and educating people about the realities of this.
Yeah, and there's a massive drive from like one of the big political parties in the UK to like tell you that this is a problem. It's like it's one of their main tenets is that like we're taking on too many immigrants, and they want to like leave the EU so that we can control these things. And it's like, I don't foresee when the UK, I don't know if it's left the EU right now or not. I think it's like sort of like in some weird
middle
20-year long transition. But I don't see like the laws like changing any once we like leave. Like, you might need to get a visa, but apart from that, like, you're still going to be able to come and work here.
Right.
Maybe it'll just be easier to boot someone out. I don't know.
Yeah. And the UK's still going to bring on asylum seekers. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah,
That's not going to change. So,
I mean, I've voted for Brexit, and I agree with it. I just think that if people were like properly educated, and if they like actually thought about these things, there probably would have been a lot less people voting for Brexit, because I think there's a lot of people out there that have these like surface level notions about immigrants and about the reasons why they want to leave the EU. And I think it was probably a massive driving force for the platform of Brexit.
I think it was.
It was never really like went into any great detail.
Yeah, but well, you know what? Maybe like one day we can talk a little bit more of detail about the actual Brexit campaign itself. But like, we know looking back that like none of the policies that were being sold on either side mattered at all. It's like the idea was it would like get rid of get rid of all of our immigrants, but we now know that like, the immigrant problem isn't that bad. And the idea was it would save all this money from like EU funding, and then we realised that of course we're going to lose much more than that, and not having to. And now that it's not a free market, so like it's become clear in retrospect that the slogans or like the buzzwords and points that the two sides were fighting over during the Brexit campaign were just emotionally based. Like they didn't have any fact to it. It was just to get people to feel strongly about it. And like immigration was something that people do really, really feel strongly about. And it's one of those ones that just kind of like gathered hold in the public consciousness,
It's almost like its own self-contained echo chamber as well, because I think like we said in the first episode about people that had the backlash against like trans people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that people are just inherently. There's not just like a group of people that are just inherently racist. There's a reason that these people think like this, and I think it might be that it's the first thing that they see when they think, Britain's changing and I don't like it. What is it? And they look around and they see this, and like a bunch of people have made the same assumption. So those people then get together at like pubs. They get together on Facebook and they start like talking about it, and it's almost like. It's almost like an anti-PC brigade now, where like people are talking about immigrants and how they're like good, and these people are just like talking against it. It's almost become this like anti-PC like meta where it's now almost like cool to speak out against stuff that's like PC, and like immigration is like one of them. If you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah. I kind of do what you mean. Yeah. I I definitely think that this is one of those facts where like these two things have become like intertwined, like the fact that the world's like just looking worse, and people are like blaming this on immigrants, and I'm convinced that there is like a common factor there. I'm convinced that there's like the people are upset about this for a reason, and it's not just because they're racist. That's not it's because they feel that there's an injustice here, and so I think there's something to it. I think it's wrong at the end of the day. Like the reason I voted for Brexit was not because I cared about immigration, but it's clearly like one of those problems that's like big enough where it's like a societal thing now.
Yeah, I think you kind of get lumped in with it as well. If you say to anyone that you voted for Brexit, they just immediately think you're a racist. It's
Right?
like,
Yeah.
I don't give a shit about immigrants. But I was saying I don't give a shit.
After all that, I got a flying fuck.
I actually, I was watching a YouTube video once, and I think it was this guy in America, and you know how there was like a big thing about how a bunch of like college professors like spoke out against the norm, and it was called like the intellectual dark web. And it was like a bunch of these guys who were like professors in colleges. It was like Jordan Peterson and stuff like that. And there was this guy called Brett Weinstein, I think his name was, and he spoke about, I think it was on Joe Rogan. He spoke about like some people actually have like biological imperative to be like racist, and the example that he used was that back in the day when like there was like people were coming across the borders, when people were like moving from like Spain to America and stuff like that, there are like diseases and illnesses that people in these countries like develop antibodies to.
Yeah.
Like I think it's Spanish flu, for example. Like if people in Spain develop, I'm not saying this is how it went down, but if they develop like an antibody to that disease and then it spreads between their population, they can still then carry that disease like to another location. So I think in the very beginning of like transference of people from like locations, there was a lot of this like transferring of diseases and like viruses and stuff like that. So people actually have like a biological imperative to be like, whoa, you're different actually, so
Yeah,
pump the brakes.
I have heard of that theory, and I've heard actually someone expand upon it, which is really interesting. So I could talk to you about that, because basically like the idea that you're talking about makes sense, but when you think about the fact that this is a biological process which has existed for like many thousands of years, like hundreds of thousands of years, and people have only really been crossing borders in the last 1,000, like up until a very, very recently, relative time ago, the furthest people that you would ever encounter would be like the clan over the hill, and you would never ever go past that. So like the whole concept of like a white person seeing a brown person and being like, oh, this could be bacteria or whatever, or some shit, that's kind of like debunked. But the idea is now, it's because like, and like going back to the concept of these clans as well, like because humans were so isolated back then, there would have been perceptual differences between people. So like, if we're going to Scotland, like there's the Mitchells over there, like they have like big noses, and there's the Paytons, every single one of them's ginger, and there's the McDouglases, and like they're all kind of tall, and there's the Adams, and they have big fucking foreheads or whatever. So
Something
like,
else. Huh?
Sure, yeah, I could go on all day. So like the idea is that human beings are like biologically driven to identify differences, but the idea isn't so much that it's like pathogens. It's more to do with the fact that biologically that person comes from a different culture, therefore you cannot guarantee that their actions are going to be safe. Like the way that you act around them and they act around about you is not going to breed a safe environment, because you come from a set of different standards and norms. So there's like this aspect of danger there. But it's just an evolution of exactly what you're saying, that there is like a reason that people are alienist. This is alienist, whatever. Yeah, like there's a reason that that people mix with like.
Yeah, there's a reason to be wary, I guess. Yeah, but just to finish this off, I think it's weird that people like have these opinions, and I think it's kind of similar to the gay and the trans one, where it's like people have this backlash to it, and it's almost like surface level.
Yeah, yeah.
And there must be something a bit deeper going on that makes them think this.
I completely agree with you.
But upon like basic analysis of what's going on, it's like, it's not what you think it is, and maybe there are problems here. I think if people can come here and claim benefits, or if they can come here, work for a couple of months and then just get to stay, it's like, okay, maybe I can see that there's like issues here.
Sure.
But those are like issues that are like really nuanced issues about immigration, and they're not the ones people are like talking about.
Nah, they took our jobs type of thing,
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, no, they didn't. First of all, they weren't your jobs in the first place, because
right.
the EU law literally lets them come across the border and work here and gives them the same rights that you have. So you can't really think of Britain as like a self-contained place that has jobs for British people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about the EU has like a set amount of jobs, and anyone in the EU can take any of those jobs as long as they apply and want to like work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't seem like they get any specific extra benefits when it comes to these jobs either. They get the job, they don't get benefits, and people almost like mix that up with like asylum seekers, where they're like, oh, they come here and they get benefits, and they lump that in with like immigrants. And at the end, they just don't know. They just don't know any of these things. They just like say the first thing that comes into their head. They see immigrants and they think bad because bad things are happening.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like one of those typically reactionary thoughts, isn't it? And it's like clearly one of those ones that we've seen that really does stick with people and gets them really, really emotional. And maybe that's part of the reason why we do see it pervaded around as much as it does. It's because it is one of those passionate topics. But I completely agree, particularly after this conversation. Like I wasn't super clued up on immigration, but to me, there's no logical argument for the passion that people get, for instance during Brexit and these political opinions came about.
Yeah, and it seems like the legislation for it isn't
bad.
Isn't particularly unreasonable. It just seems like the perception of the legislation and the perception of what's going on is bad. Mm-hmm. It's like if you just scratch the surface, you immediately see that what you're actually shouting about is like totally different. Like it almost just comes down to don't just start shouting things when you haven't like thought about it. It's the same thing with the Twitter backlash that we spoke about before. It's like, don't just like type out the first thing that comes to your head and then hit send. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't run onto Facebook and post something about keeping Britain British. Don't like,
because you're probably going to sound like an idiot. Yeah,
exactly. Just like think about what you're saying and like, for God's sake, man, just don't be screaming when you don't know like what the fuck you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. That's a really good one to always to end on. Most of these episodes are, don't be a fucking idiot.
And that has been episode 5, episode 6?
Episode 5.
Episode 5 of Guide to the 21st Century. I really enjoyed your topic this week. Your topic was fantastic. Mine ended up being just like, why are people doing this?
Funny. I learned a lot anyway, and I think I dare say that a lot of people that would listen to this would probably learn a lot as well. Yeah,
I mean, just to even know the basic laws of like immigration in the EU and across the UK borders, and to know that there like isn't an overwhelming number of people that are coming to Britain. There are a normal amount of people that are coming here,
right?
Less than elsewhere, because we're an island. Even though people seem to think that Syrians are coming in their thousands.
Yeah, storming the beaches.
They literally think the south coast of England is like is just filled
so that's
with
in The Walking Dead, just like people are crawling over each other, gonna get over the wall.
Like there's literally just dinghies coming across every 15 minutes. With 12 people on them. They're like rowing across.
Yeah.
They're holding their children up. It's like, no, there's like one dinghy maybe every 6 months.
And every one of them makes the news, so you know about it.
Okay, I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Okay.
So thanks all for listening, guys. See you next time.